Welcome to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books, hosted by me, Zibby Owens. It's an award-winning podcast with over 1,900 episodes, all featuring authors of books you love and those you have yet to discover. Listen daily 5 times a week. Then go to zibbymedia.com and learn more about what the LA Times called the Zibbyverse. Zibby Media includes Zibby's Bookshop, an independent bookstore in Santa Monica, Zibby Books Publishing, Zibby Retreats, Zibby's Book Club, and more. Go check it out at zibbymedia.com and follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens. It'll take you where you need to go. Thanks for listening. Shirlene Obuobi is the author of Between Friends and Lovers, a novel. Shirlene is a Ghanaian-American cardiologist, cartoonist, and author who grew up in Chicago, Illinois, Hot Springs, Arkansas, and the Woodlands, Texas. She appeared on Good Morning America to promote her debut novel On Rotation and is a regular contributor to The Washington Post. When she isn't in the hospital, she can be found drawing comics, writing on her phone, and talking to everyone who will listen about women's heart health. Welcome, Shirlene. Thank you so much for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books to discuss Between Friends and Lovers. Congratulations.
Thank you so much for having me, Zibby.
I was just raving before we started about how much I'm loving your book, so this is such a treat to get to discuss all the details. Tell listeners what Between Friends and Lovers is about, please.
For sure. So Between Friends and Lovers is about my main character, Josephine Boateng. She just finished her medical residency and is unable to really move forward with a typical job because she's dealing with a lot of mental health issues and burnout. And so instead kind of sustains herself through a career as an influencer. She's also very much enmeshed in a family of wealthy socialites and is best friends with one of the male leads, Ezra, has been in love with him basically for the last 10 years, but it seems to be unrequited. And in the beginning of the book, she kind of decides that, you know what, I really need to move on from this. And she moves right into the male lead, Malcolm, who is kind of everything that Ezra isn't, but probably everything that Joe actually needs.
Love that. Oh my gosh. And Malcolm, of course, is a novelist, best-selling novelist who you do such a good job of physically, I feel like I can see him in my head in every scene, like the way you describe him. B, like his whole sort of personality. And, by alternating the points of view in the book, I feel like you're really letting us, get this backstage view. Like, I feel like it's mostly Joe's book, but with Malcolm, we're like, you get to see, all the things that she doesn't get to see. It's like this, which I love, and develop like so much affection for him too, right? And seeing, because you wouldn't know, I'm sorry for rambling, but like if you were just reading Joe's point of view and like in a scene where he decides not to kiss her right away, you might not know why he was doing that. But now we know completely why and respect it and all of this. So tell me a little bit about choosing how to tell the story.
Oh, for sure. So it has a little bit of a different structure than I think a lot of other romance novels in the genre. First of all, it's a dual point of view, which might confuse people who walk in thinking it's going to be a love triangle. I tell people it's not really a love triangle if you really have to focus on what's important for Joe and Joe's growth and her journey. And Joe's point of view is in first person past and Mal's is in third. I did that very intentionally as well to just kind of direct people to the point that, I know Mal's perspective is here, but it's there to help her inform, as you very astutely picked up on, inform readers that this is really still about Joe, right? Yeah. And we're getting background on Mal, specifically because Mal's personality is, he's a lot more understated. He's very anxious, he's introverted, right? He's keeps to himself. He's undergone a growth arc himself off page. He's a little bit older than Joe by I think 3 years or so. And he's already kind of gone through what Joe is going through right now. And so he is not someone who would otherwise be very loud and seen, especially when compared to Ezra, who takes up as much space as possible every time he shows up. So I think I did that so that you could see a little bit of Mal's interiority as well and kind of understand why he is probably the one who's good for Joe, and also to kind of make people kind of focus and remember that it's a romance, but I always write women's fiction-y romances. It's still about her.
Yep. Yeah. I could see that. Well, it's also interesting, even with Mal's backstory, which you referenced, even his past relationships with women and like sort of the toxicity of some of his choices and all of that. And like really going into that with the point of view of his friends as well, like sort of showing him and pointing out like, okay, beware and you have a type and, like look before you leap and all of that. Then we get even more of an insight into that, which I also found fascinating. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that it would be really easy to read Mal as I've seen people be like, oh, he's so perfect. I'm like, he is not perfect. Jumping in is actually the way that he even is jumping in with Joe is not necessarily, it's a little ill-advised, right? Especially considering his history. He just trusts himself a little bit more and also has gotten to the point where I think several times in his narrative, I have him directly say, like, if this doesn't work out, I will be okay. I
Yep.
will go home. I will lick my wounds. I've been by myself for a while. I will be fine, right? Like, just kind of like that is, he hasn't changed dramatically from who he was, right?
Mhm.
But he does know how to recover.
And I love that you made him a novelist who's like getting a film deal and that you have the whole like, we're reading a book, but it's about a novelist and, all of that. So that was also very fun.
It's so fun to include a little. I always say that because I'm a physician and I'm a writer, and so my characters are often what I do because I get lazy.
Well, I love the medical stuff in here as well. Even the scene in the zoo where, the man falls off a carousel and not only does not you, but Joe and Mal, help in trying to save this man and having to break his ribs and saying like, sometimes you have to hurt people to save them. And I feel like that's like a metaphor also for the whole story.
Ooh, yes, yes. I'm so glad you picked up on that. It's one of my favorite scenes.
It's awesome. Not to mention why they're even in the zoo to begin with, which is like one of the more outlandish social media, situations as well. I'm like, they're not really doing this, right? Wait, tell me more about Jo as influencer because she was a doctor, is a doctor, but was dissatisfied, emotional, like it was not working from a mental health standpoint. And, she's feeling conflicted even with these job offers that keep coming. Should I go back? Should I not go back? And is being an influencer enough? But I want to earn money, but blah, blah, blah. So tell me a little bit about that. And as a physician yourself, like, are you given opportunities to you said like, what's the word? Like promoting snake oil and basically, different things. So tell me about that point of view.
Yeah, for sure. So I draw comics, and I have a large platform that I talk about comics, and it's called graphic medicine, basically, right? And then I have a large platform, so I do sometimes get offers from different companies, and most of those offers, indeed, are from supplement companies, things that aren't really tested, that don't have rigorous science behind them, but they offer me a lot of money, right? But they offer a lot of money because having like you being able to say, oh, cardiologist says that this supplement will save you from XYZ has a lot of power behind it, and you can drive a lot of sales. But there are a lot of physicians, a lot of people in the healthcare spaces, and a lot of people who are in professions with some degree of power that a lot of companies are kind of try to engage with in order to sell products. And there's questions about the ethics behind that, right? And for Joe went into medicine for several reasons. One of those, like one of the prominent ones, was that because she has to rely on herself and it's a reliable source of income, but that's a very slow way to get there. It's also because she really cares, and that's a central part of her character. I think when people encounter her at first, they might think she's very brash. She's extremely blunt. She gets to the point, but she's quite compassionate as well. And so she goes into this field for this purpose, and then can't quite hack it. And isn't really able to dive herself back into it. So the influencer thing is kind of her way to still keep her foot in the door, right? She still gets to do the stuff that she likes. She still gets to do the education about health, but she does also feel a lot of guilt about that because it's not very patient facing. And in a lot of ways, I think in the story, I'm trying to show kind of this other lens, right? Where yeah, like someone, if she tells somebody she's got an MD, but all she's doing is content creation, people are probably going to judge her for that. She's going to judge herself for it. She's going to feel like she's not using her talents or her skills to the greatest degree. And she struggles with that. There's, on top of that, there's the insecurity that comes with it, right? Because you may make a lot of money when you have a deal, But if you go a long stretch of time without one, then you kind of lose your stable ground, which is she has several conversations with her agent, for example, that are kind of around that.
So do you have an agent for social media for your platform?
I only recently got one, and it's really funny. I got one. A lot of what I've done on my platform were things that I was writing this book and was like, I should probably do that.
I know, I was reading it and I was like, am I supposed to be doing any of that? Like, I don't,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's really funny. Like a lot of her health education, because I started writing this book in 2022, and I used to draw exclusively comics, and then I started writing Jo making these videos where she's educating people about things. I was like, that is a good idea. And same with the agent. I did not have an agent until like a month or two ago. And I'd had a friend who had been offering to share me with a representative. And I was like, it's fine. And then I wrote this book and I was like, oh, maybe I should just talk to them.
So funny. Did she read the character? What's her name? Olivia? Is that right?
Denise.
Denise. Denise.
No, 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 no,
Oh my God.
no. I don't know whether any of them have ever read or intend to read this book. I'll keep it that way.
Okay. Okay. Well, I did really enjoy that whole thing, and having to, constantly be thinking about how to turn your life and work into content
Mhm.
and yet maintain some sort of barrier between your private life and not. I also really appreciated that with Jo. And I really liked Renata, the older, the mom, Ezra's mom, who you also develop as a character. And there aren't often moms in like rom-coms and books like this. And I feel like we got to know her and how important Jo is to her, but have things happen with her professional and her personal life. And tell me about that character and the decision to sort of make her. I mean, she could have easily been just like in the background.
Oh yes, I love Renata. She's one of my favorite characters, and I think I was thinking about a few things with her. Number one, I think that the wealthy white mom was usually going to be the villain character, right? The one who's like, "Stay away from my son,"
Mhm.
or like is very snooty and looks down on Jo. But I really wanted her to be Jo's mom. Basically, she's her maternal figure, right? She is full of love, right? She's feisty. She has this own career of her own, but she's also made her own choices and almost her own mistakes.
Mhm.
See her in those moments. One of my favorite things to do with Renata is show her in those moments of vulnerability, where she is not just this superstar, supermodel, Project Runway,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And she's also not just Ezra's mom. Jo and Renata have their own completely
Yes.
separate relationship, right? And I just wanted to put that there. I also felt that it was really important for Ezra and Jo's relationship to have more weight. That
Mhm.
Jo would feel as though if she were to lose Ezra, she may also lose his mom,
Yep.
right? And lose the one family she sort of has.
Yep.
And so I wanted to maintain that no, like this love that they have for each other is so genuine that honestly, it was not ever going to be a possibility. They were always going to have the bond that they do. So
Did you know from the start the emancipation sort of plot line that Jo has been on her own since age 16 and all of that?
yes, yes. I always knew that Joe's would have come from an abusive household. I didn't exactly have the structure for what it looked like, but I always had the piece of she's been kind of alone and
Mhm.
unmoored for a long time. And that is her status quo.
Yeah. Interesting. So how did this idea come to you? And what was going on with On Rotation when give me the timeline of everything.
On Rotation was about to come out.
Mhm.
So my first book was about to come out, and I sold Between Friends and Lovers on proposal. I call it my burnout book. So when On Rotation, or when I sold Between Friends and Lovers, that was June 2022. I just finished my first year of cardiology fellowship, and I had just also finished residency, internal medicine residency. COVID had, I was an internal medicine resident during COVID, so that was very traumatic. And the morale amongst myself and a lot of my friends was extremely low. There were running jokes amongst all of us about what kind of antidepressant we were using, and we were just very burnt out. So I call BFL my burnout book, right? Which is like, if I weren't to do this, like what else could I do?
Mm.
Right. I also I'm a big fan of love triangles, but I'm cursed with second lead syndrome, which is that I always root for the second lead. I think the second lead is always healthier, right? He always teaches the female lead something about herself, but she always chooses the exciting one. And
Hmm.
I wanted to turn that trope on its head because I wanted it to really focus in a romance on the female lead. I wanted to be like, what does she actually need out of this, right? And so those two kind of ideas at the same time sort of melded into what we see now between friends and lovers, with Joe's central conflict as well as kind of the relationship she has with these two men.
Wow, so interesting. Have you had anything like this in your own life? Not that it's any of my business, but
With the center of a love triangle, no.
yeah. Okay.
No, I have not. I've had several friendships like the one with Ezra. And
Hmm.
I know a lot of men like Mal as well.
Hmm.
It was actually, that was another part of it too, is that like, I feel like a couple of things, we rarely get to see Black men depicted as kind of softer characters,
Hmm.
empathetic characters. And I know like four Mals. One of my friends who I think in the back of the book, I had him almost sensitivity read for Mal to be, see whether I was getting him right, right? Because he's very similar to him, just very kind, very keeps to himself. Is
Hmm.
also always in the gym,
Yeah.
right? So like, it's like I was like, I know these guys. My little brother is a lot like Mal as well. So I did craft them based off of some familiarity with people
Hmm.
like them, relationships like them, but not exactly.
Interesting. And tell me your whole backstory. Like, where are you from? And when did you decide to be a doctor? And then how did the writing come into it? And like, what's your whole life story?
My life story.
Go ahead.
Um, so, so I was born in Ghana. I came to the States when I was 6. We started off in Chicago, then went to Arkansas, then Texas. I went to WashU for undergrad and Chicago for medical training. And I've actually just recently moved to Providence, Rhode Island to start
Hmm.
my job. So I've moved around quite a lot. And my mom is a physician. My mom is a neonatologist. So I was exposed pretty early on to medical medicine. She did residency and fellowship while I was in elementary and middle school. So I
Wow.
saw her in training as well. And so like when we moved to Arkansas, we moved to a very small town, and that was part of a waiver job, right? For immigration, you go to a place that's underserved for a certain number of years. And so because we were in this itty bitty town, Malvern, Arkansas, I was also helpful. It was all hands on deck in the hospital. So I kind of like lived there. Right. And, like every kid sees their parent and is like, I'm going to be like you someday. That was definitely me. And then as I got a little bit older, I really started to feel, I think that the reality of it is that it's very hard to motivate me to do things. It's hard to motivate me to get up every day without a very clear like mission or purpose. And within medicine, you're needed in a way that it's hard to be needed in other professions, right? In a very visceral way. I think I really like belonging to a family network and being a part of a patient's care journey is almost like being like let into their family in some way. And that is something that was very appealing to me. And then I like the sciences. But I've always written and I've always drawn since I was a child. My 10th birthday party, I asked for a book signing event. And my parents
I
put it up.
read that. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And when I was 14, I self-published a book that is embarrassingly very easy to find, right? And so it's something that I've always kind of done. And in the time right before On Rotation, I wrote On Rotation during the pandemic and kind of in my off times between stints in the ICUs. And it really became, especially romance in particular, it became a source of comfort for me, if anything, to be able to kind of dissociate from the horrors that I was like experiencing in real time and the exhaustion and everything, and to into a story that still used elements of it, and very much a way to process the things that I was seeing and encountering, and these new, because when you're one of the things about being in medicine is that you meet so many people on the worst days of their lives,
Mm.
and you see so many different families, so many different people under pressure. And it really informs how you think about love, how it manifests in the hardest moments. And so I felt like when people are like, why do you write romance? I'm like, it kind of felt very natural because it's not necessarily the genre that I read the most, but it felt very natural to kind of explore these ideas and how people come to love each other and how they show it. So that's
What,
kind of my spiel.
wait, what genre do you like to read?
I read a little bit of everything. I read sci-fi fantasy. I read lit fic. I've recently started dipping my toe into thriller as well. Lately, I haven't read as much as I want to lately because I'm studying for exams as well. So,
Yes.
but I actually, before I wrote On Rotation, I didn't read much romance at all.
So do you have any downtime where you're not working on something or other?
I have a little downtime before I start my job. I do have an exam in a week, and so like a really big one. And then I have another one in October. So it doesn't feel exactly like downtime right now, just because I'm grinding. But I find my little pockets.
Wow. Well, I'm very impressed. Do you miss these characters? Like, will there be a future life for them in other books, or are you writing something new?
I am writing something new. It depends on how BFL does. I would love to write an Ezra book because I love Ezra. He's meant to be. I think some people will love him too, and some people will hate him. He's not meant to be a villain, and so I
I'm
love.
not rooting for him as much, I have to be honest. But okay.
Oh, which is totally fine. I actually, it's very interesting to see who roots for him and who doesn't. Some
Mm.
people really root for Ezra. They're like, I don't really see the chemistry with Mal and Joe, and I would rather have something with Ezra. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. I don't agree. But I do like Ezra as a character, and I would love to explore him growing. And so I would write an Ezra book. I've already figured out how it would start.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, yep.
Awesome. Wow. Well, what advice do you have for aspiring authors? And what advice do you have for time-starved people who can't seem to be as productive as you?
I think for aspiring authors, I will say the cliched one first, which is that you just have to finish the thing, right? I think before I finished on Rotation, I would always get into a cycle of going back and editing things I'd written, like chapters I'd written before to try to get everything perfect. But you really have to move ahead before you can zoom out and see what you need to fix and move and where. And then the next thing is to really, really try not to be too precious because sometimes we get super attached to the words themselves, the sentences, the prose, and they may be beautiful, but they may not actually serve the story the way they need to, or they may not even serve the reading experience. And learning, one of the big things I had to learn was how to cut, right? How to cut, how to trim, how to think about my audience as I write, while still maintaining my own artistic integrity. So those are kind of the two things I'd say.
Amazing. Well, Shirlene, so fun. Thank you so much. Really love this book, Between Friends and Lovers. Congratulations. And yeah, I'll be following along. Can't wait.
Thank you so, so much. This was such a delight, Zibby.
Okay, you too. All right, bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. If you love it, please leave a review and follow us on social @Zibby Owens and @Zibby Readers.